Good morning, everyone. It is Saturday, March. I'm about to drop my iPad here. I apologize. Good morning, everyone. It is Saturday, March the 27th, 2021. It is currently 11:31 a.m. Central Time. And once again, I'm here at Victory Baptist Church. I'm in the sanctuary of Victory Baptist Church. I'm back here with all of my podcast equipment. I've got Bibles, I've got commentaries, I've got dictionaries, I've got notebooks, I've got pencils, and I don't know if any of that's going to be of any help right now. And I'm not going to try to utilize too many of the resources that I have here next to me because I'm really going to try to present to you maybe a problem, maybe an interpretation, and then have you research and struggle and see what you can discover. Now, I know that's always dangerous when I do that because typically, not always, a lot of times what happens is I come up with this very great idea. I'll give this to everyone, and then they're going to send me all of these emails, and we're going to have this great intellectual, theological discussion, and then I'm met with complete and utter silence. And of course, if I turn on the microphone and do a recording about something controversial, then I'll get lots of, like a lot of people love to send an email to argue or to debate. A lot of people don't like to have email discussions where we really discuss and work together to find an answer. Like people love to send emails that say, you're wrong, you're an idiot, and attack, but not like, hey, you wanted us to work on this. Here's my work on this. I struggled with this. I did this study. I looked this up. Not a lot of people like to do that, which may be telling. I don't know. You can draw your own conclusions from that. But this is going to be very interesting, and it's going to be very frustrating as well. This is the kind of thing that discourages me a lot about Christianity, and I'm just going to be honest with you. I try to always do that. This is thing that just sometimes makes me just question everything, and it really bothers me because I guess maybe you realize this, maybe you haven't realized this. For some people, it doesn't bother them, and I wish you could tell me why it doesn't bother you. Maybe you could help me, all right? Maybe we need a counseling session, and you can help me. But it bothers me greatly that the reality of the situation is whenever I pick up my Bible and I read any verse, that whatever interpretation I seek to try to get across, try to teach, try to present, that there are literally, it feels like 100 competing interpretations of every verse. In other words, every verse in the Bible have hundreds and hundreds of competing interpretations. And that is maddening to me. Because you would think that we should be able to figure out the basic meaning of a verse, but in many cases we cannot. And there's one section of the Sermon on the Mount, which is what we've been working on here in this series on the Sermon on the Mount, that there are lots of competing interpretations, and it once again brings to the surface this never-ending struggle that no matter what interpretation you come up with, someone else is going to come along and go, nope, you're wrong. Nope, you're wrong. Nope, you're wrong. And it's like, okay, can we agree on, is there any verse in the Bible we can agree on? Any one? Jesus wept. I don't even know if we can agree on that. I don't even know. I don't really think it would. Yeah, who knows what people would do? But it's always amazing. And I've tried to do a very good job of demonstrating that to the people in my church, is that whenever we're dealing with a passage of scripture, I'm like, okay, there's like 8 different interpretations to this passage. Let's work through each one. Now, sometimes it's very tedious. Sometimes it's very academic. Sometimes it takes a very long time. And I know sometimes the people in my church are like, so which one's the right one? I'm like, well, I don't know. This is the one I think is right. But I mean, everyone else says that we're wrong. So it's just one of the realities of being a Christian. And it's very discouraging. And we have a very famous passage that we're going to be looking at today, that once again, there's all of these competing interpretations. And what's bizarre is, so we're working through the Sermon on the Mount, right? We've been a part of this series. I'm not going to review everything that we've done. We've been reviewing sermons on the Sermon on the Mount that offers completely different perspectives than the one that I've presented to you, right? So you're already getting kind of a feel for that. But what's interesting is I started getting messages from someone who wasn't even aware that we're doing a series on the Sermon on the Mount. I don't know how they missed it, but they didn't even realize it. And they started sending me these messages. in regards to a section in the Sermon on the Mount offering a very different interpretation, which then led me to start researching. And I'm like, well, there's a lot of people who have a lot of different interpretations on this. So we're just going to jump to that part of the Sermon on the Mount. And then we'll back up and look at some of the parts that we've skipped over. We're just going to be, this whole series is just going to be, I don't know how long we're going to go, just kind of an ongoing series dealing with the Sermon on the Mount, dealing with different issues. And the sermon is so well known. Everyone quotes from it. And I feel the Sermon on the Mount, I hate to say this, I feel that the Sermon on the Mount has become more of a weapon that we put in our, I don't know how to describe it, that we put in our holster, right? Like it's a gun. And then we pull that weapon out to utilize it whenever we feel we need to utilize it. It's like the Sermon on the Mount. Everyone grabs it on and go, this proves my ideology. This proves my point. And now I'm going to use it to beat you over the head with to tell you you're wrong. I think everyone uses the Sermon on the Mount for their own advancement, to advance their own ideologies. And I don't know if we ever approach the Sermon on the Mount going, this is a sermon preached to us by the eternal Son of God, and we need to humble ourselves before it and try to understand exactly what he's trying to say. And because I think we view each section or almost each verse as its own idea, separated from the fact that it's a sermon, which I think is troubling, and we've talked about in detail. But I've spent enough time. Let's just jump in. You ready? Let's just jump in. I've spent enough time there kind of introducing all of this, but let's just jump in. All right. Are you ready? Now I'm hating the fact that I should have started this differently. But I did not. Okay. So I apologize. Here we go. Sermon on the Mount obviously covers from Matthew 5 to Matthew 7. In Matthew 5, we read these very, very famous words. All right. Listen to them carefully. Matthew 5:38. You have heard that it hath been said, an eye for an eye, and a tooth for a tooth. But I say unto you, that you resist not evil, but whosoever shall smite thee on thy right cheek, turn to him the other also. Now stop right there. This passage of Scripture has been so debated by so many people, and everyone has their, I will go so far to say, is I think every individual has their own individual interpretation. And I think many of the interpretations are more focused on what it isn't saying than what it could be saying. And we want to reduce what Jesus is calling us to do here to the most acceptable level that we can. And what do I mean by that? Okay, Jesus seems to be saying, don't resist evil, turn the other cheek. And we don't like the implications of almost creating the idea of being a pacifist, right? Hey, someone comes after you, you just turn the other cheek. You don't resist evil. And everyone immediately, no. He's not preaching pacifism here. No, by no means. You can defend yourself. If someone comes after you, you can pull a gun and kill them if you need to defend yourself. So Jesus is not saying that. So what is he saying? So I've heard, well, all he is saying here is that if someone insults you, it's just an insult, not physical. It's not a physical assault, or it's just a slap. It's not. If it's just a slap, you turn the other cheek. So I've heard it. Let me go through. I know I'm cutting myself off there because I'm getting ahead of myself, but I'll go through some of the things I've been told. Jesus is talking about when someone insults you verbally, then you, in a sense, turn the other cheek and let them verbally insult you. This is not about any kind of physical assault. Others saying, no, this is not a punch. This is not something that could permanently hurt you or put you in danger. If someone just slaps you in an insulting way, right? Do you just turn the cheek and let them slap you, right? I don't know why I'm doing that since you can't see me, but maybe the sound effects add to it, all right? But it's really starting to hurt. Okay, but you get the, so it's either just a verbal insult or it's just a slap. But this has nothing to do at all with any, like, this should not come into play when we talk about guns or gun control or gun ownership or killing someone in self-defense. This has nothing to do with any of that, no application. So we reduce it to the most acceptable thing possible. And I've heard Christians say, well, Jesus could not possibly have meant that. So, because why? Jesus couldn't have meant it. What's the reason? Let me tell me. You see, when they came to get Jesus and they physically began to attack him, hurt him, and kill him, did he fight back? They said, well, no, he couldn't fight back. He couldn't fight back because he was God and he was supposed to go to the cross. Okay, but doesn't then Peter take that idea and say he's an example to us and when we are dealing with ungodly persecution? Yes or no? But no, Jesus told him to buy a sword. If he told him to buy a sword, then that sword meant stab and kill people if you need to. But because I've been told so many times, Jesus couldn't have meant that. So he couldn't have meant that. I'm like, well, then what does it mean? And basically, it doesn't mean much of anything. Basically, it doesn't mean much. Just like if someone insults you, turn the other cheek. It's really not that big a deal. It's not really that big a deal. Now, I find it hard to believe that a sermon, that when he is finished, the people are absolutely shocked and amazed by it. And I'm also perplexed that Jesus in this very sermon says things like, for I say unto you that except your righteousness shall exceed the righteousness of the scribes and the Pharisees, you shall in no case enter into the kingdom of heaven. That Jesus seems to be emphasizing a level of morality here that is extremely high. Like he's coming on hitting you like, here's this level of morality that these are the ethics of the kingdom. And these ethics are so high, so radical, so revolutionary. And you always hear people preach it that way, that what Jesus presents here is the sermon of sermons. He presents an understanding of ethics and morality that nobody had ever heard before. He went way beyond the Old Testament law. He went straight to the heart. This is hard stuff to hear. And then when we get to turn the other cheek and resist not evil, well, I mean, come on. Jesus wouldn't be crazy and give us some kind of rule that would go no, he's just like, if someone insults you, just don't insult them back. If someone slaps you, then don't retaliate. Okay. But if anything other than that, game on. Anything other than that, shoot them 3 times, stab them, use a sword. So you're like, well, wait a minute. So really, this is not that. So really, this is not that radical. This is really not that radical. It's just pretty kind of just common thing, right? Really, is that how we understand it? So, but other people have come with a different interpretation. So let's again read it again. Matthew 5:38. You have heard that it's been said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. Now, that idea of an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth is many cases in reference to the Old. Obviously, it's a reference to the Old Testament and to the Old Testament understanding of being able to take, it appeared, personal vengeance for someone. In other words, an eye for an eye. They take an eye, they lose an eye. A tooth for a tooth. You begin to repay them in kind. And it seems to be in a very physical, literal idea. Eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. Literal retaliation for what they have done to make them suffer in equal amount. It seems to be at a very literal understanding that what he has referenced. And in contrast to that very literal eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth concept, Jesus offers something completely radically different. No, it's not an eye for an eye. It's not a tooth for a tooth. It's turn the other cheek and resist not evil, not repaying in kind, not giving what you're getting. All right. So does he mean it in a literal way, in a figurative way? What does he actually mean? Well, I'm going to read to you some of the articles that has been sent to me. Right. And I'm going to present these to you, and I'm not going to necessarily try to give an answer, but I want you to at least consider this. And so the listeners, I really would like you to participate here and let me know what you think about this. Tell me if you agree, disagree, and why you disagree, and see if we can work through this. All right. Here's the first one that was sent to me. All right. On turning the other cheek and how it doesn't mean what you think it means. So it doesn't mean what you think it means. So whatever you thought that it meant, it doesn't mean that. So here we go. We're always glad here someone's going to finally explain to us what it means, because it clearly doesn't mean what you think it means. But I don't know if they know what I think it means. Okay, but all right. So I think what they should say, it doesn't mean what some think it means, because clearly there is very little agreement on what this text actually means. Okay, I've seen it to me, everyone just tries to, it doesn't mean that. And then they just go on to live their life. It's got to mean something, right? It's got to mean something, agreed, right? Here's what they have. So first they have the quote, Matthew 5:38-39. You have heard that it was said, eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. But I tell you, do not resist an evil person. If anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to them the other cheek also. In just one tiny section of the Sermon on the Mount, we have 3 sayings back to back, each one pithy and profound, and yet so often misquoted and misunderstood. All right? In a previous article, I explored the idea of going the second mile. Just like with the first, I'll keep it short and to the point. First of all, we need to pay attention to the text. The verse is so often misquoted as, if someone slaps you on the cheek, turn the other cheek. But that's not what it says. It says the right cheek. What does the author of these tight, quippy little sayings feel they need? Why does the author of these tight, quippy little sayings feel the need to include which cheek it is? Now let's stop right here. Okay. Why would the author, or why would Jesus? Are we saying these are actually the words of Jesus? Are these the words of the writer of the gospel? So is he really giving us an accurate retelling of what Jesus said, or is just the author who came up with this? So that's just an interesting way of phrasing it. Why did the author choose? He's quoting the words of Jesus, right? Is that not so? All right. So the issue for them is the right cheek. That's what we need to focus on. That's the key hermeneutical clue in how to interpret this. Let's see where they go with this. In Jesus' culture, people were considered all to be right-handed. There was no other option because the left hand was unclean. Imagine then that you are facing a right-handed person and he slaps you on your right cheek. How does he do that? He backhands you. A slap was a great insult, but a backhanded slap was far more demeaning. All right? The traditional Jewish interpretation of the law basically says a slap incurred a fine of 200 silver coins, but a backhanded slap required a payment of 400. The same amount as for spitting on someone. It was more than violence. It was degrading. It was what you gave to an inferior or a slave. Imagine you're a low-class slave in the ancient Roman world. You are powerless. You are marginalized. Your life is not your own. To try to run away would be a death sentence. Then one day, like so many other days, your master backhands you. He expects you to cower and whimper and shrink and slink off back to your duties. Maybe expects you to get on your knees and beg for forgiveness. But instead, you look at him in the eye and you turn your head and you put your left cheek forward. You've already insulted him by failing to break down, so he has the right in his mind to slap you again. But he can't slap you with his left hand because that is unclean for both of you. And he can't backhand you because your right cheek is away from him. To strike you again, his only option is to slap you with the palm of his hand. And this was not the way to slap a slave. This was reserved for equals. If he chooses to slap you again, he is forced to upgrade your status. He has to bump you up to a higher class of citizen in order to get his revenge. The victory may seem small, but it isn't. You have asserted your humanity and reminded the master you're not an object to be owned and controlled. To retaliate what I wrote about the extra mile, the offer of the other cheek was actually a way to unmask the power play to non-violently subvert the system by playing right into the ridiculousness of it all. And this is not cowardly. It takes great courage. The subversive act flips the power dynamic. By turning the other cheek instead of cowering or striking back, the wounded party brings uncomfortable embarrassment and shame on the aggressor. The oppressive system has been caught with its pants down and it doesn't know what to do. So in reality, what you're doing when you turn the other cheek, what you're doing is you're subverting the entire oppressive power system. And you're like, oh, you want to hit me? Well, now you got to treat me as an equal. You have to acknowledge that I am an equal, that I have some equality, that I am not a mere slave. I'm not less than you. This is about me exerting my right to equality. So they are saying that this ethic, that what Jesus is telling you to do is to stand up for yourself and to override an oppressive power system, to demonstrate your equalness and that you are not a slave and that you're not less than, and that you're calling into question the entire oppressive system. You're fighting back against an oppressive system is what you're doing. That's a big claim right there. That's a big claim. They go on to say, as I write this article, the Black Lives Matter movement has reached a boiling point in the United States. Wherever you look, there is a lot of beauty and a lot of ugliness. I'm not writing this article to pretend I have a plan of action, because I don't. Too many people are online right now telling protesters how to protest. I even thought that they have, even though they have no intentions of going to a protest themselves. I'm a firm believer in creative, nonviolent resistance. But the key word there is creative. And it's hard to be creative for others in a context that isn't yours. However, all right, hang on. This article has an ad popping up. However, this beautiful example of Jesus' creative nonviolence has an interesting parallel to what is happening today. Everywhere I look, I see my black brothers and sisters and siblings asserting their humanity and reminding others that they are more than statistics. The responses vary, but one way they manifest, they are a response to feeling backhanded by society. To my black siblings who were taught what turning the other cheek means, accepting injustice without a word of protest, I'm sorry. To the battered wives and abused children who were taught that turning the other cheek means staying and praying until the abuser's heart is changed, I'm sorry. To all of us who grew up in a church hearing turn the other cheek was just meant to make us nice, gentle, timid people, I'm sorry. We cannot make these words less than what they truly are. Jesus gives us nothing less than a straight point for creative nonviolence resistance that will bring transformation. It won't fix the problems of empire. That cannot be our goal, but it will change things, and it is a witness to a kingdom that is categorically different from the empire. A kingdom where the poor, oppressed, persecuted, marginalized, and yes, the backhanded are given seats at the table. This is arguing that turn the other cheek literally means standing up for your rights, asserting that you are equal, that you're not less than, calling into question the entire oppressive system. That is what they're claiming Jesus is doing there. Now, I don't know why that would be so. That's like literally standing up for yourself. Why would this be some radical righteousness? Hey, stand up for yourself. They smack you on the right cheek, turn it off from the left. Make them treat you as an equal. Make them acknowledge you are equal. How is that like, whoa, this is some radical righteousness? That would be like, yeah, about time till someone tells us to stand up for ourselves. Why didn't Jesus do that? Why didn't Jesus assert, hey, I'm the eternal Son of God. Acknowledge me for who I am. Why didn't he take a stand for him? I don't understand. Like, is that what this text is saying? Is that what this text is saying? And again, I think what is key here is Matthew 5:38. That it's that you've got to draw the contrast here. It was an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. Was an eye for an eye and a tooth for tooth a statement about the oppressive system and like, how does what Jesus say in 39 correlate with what was said in 38? I'm gonna look something up here really quick. This is interesting, and I've got probably 5 articles all making basically the same claim. Hey, and smacking on the right, they did it. They backhanded you. That was a sign of an insult and treating you less. That's for a slave. You turn and say, slap me in the left. Now you've got to treat me as an equal. And so by you doing that, I'm subverting your system. That's really what this was about. Let's do something. I would be interesting to know throughout church history when this interpretation showed up. It would be interesting to track this down. I'm going to look something up here. I'm going to go to Matthew 5:38 because I'm very interested. I'm going to go to Bible Hub here. All right. So I've got all the English translations of Matthew 5:38. All right. And then here, I'm looking here. Give me one second here. It was, I'm reading. Okay. So an eye for an eye, I'm just going to start right at the beginning. An eye for an eye. Here again, the scribes first took their stand on the letter regardless of the aim and purpose of the law, and then expanded it in a wrong direction. As originally given, it was a check on the wild justice of revenge. It said where the equilibrium of right had been disturbed by outrage, that the work of the judge was not only to do more than restore the equilibrium, unless, as in the case of theft, some further penalty was necessary for the prevention of crime. It was, in its essence, a limit in both directions, no less than an eye, for that might lead to convenience and guilt, not more, for that would open a fresh source of wrong. The scribes and their popular idea made the rule one not of judicial action only, but of private retaliation. And it was thus made the sanction of the vindictive temper that forgives nothing. So they're saying that this was basically a judicial act, eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, to basically say, hey, there's got to be a fair punishment. If you're punishing someone for taking an eye, then you take an eye. You don't do more, you don't do less. It's got to It's got to bring about some level of equality in the way this is carried out and punishment, all right? This is about punishment. And that he's saying the scribes and Pharisees took this beyond a judicial ruling, that it could be your own personal, like, hey, they did that to me, I can retaliate against them. So this seems to be about personal retaliation. If it's about personal retaliation, then Jesus is not making a statement about you asserting your right. It's about you saying, I'm not going to retaliate. So you hit me once, hit me twice. I'm not going to retaliate against you. That seems to be what the context is. Maybe I'm wrong. All right, I'm going to go through here again. Oh, wait, here's some parallel commentaries. Wait. Hang on here. Is it Exodus 21? I'm trying to find the Old Testament cross-references here. Since I don't use a Bible with cross-references. Exodus 21. This is where one time I need one. Oh, yeah, yes, here it is. Exodus chapter 21, verse 22. Let's go back for context, all right? We'll go back to verse 20. Well, you can go back to this whole thing, and you can see that this is dealing with actual physical punishments against people. Exodus 21, I'll just start in 21. Notwithstanding, if he continue a day or two, he shall not be punished, for he is his money. All right. You have to go back and read the thing that they're referring to. Okay. Now here we go. Verse 22. If a man strive and hurt a woman with child, so that her fruit depart from her, and yet no mischief follow, he shall be surely punished according as the woman's husband will lay upon him, and he shall pay as the judges determine. And if any mischief follow, then thou shalt give life for life. So if you end up killing someone, then they should be killed. That's physical retaliation for wrong. Eye for an eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot, burning for burning, wound for wound, stripe for stripe. And if a man smite the eyes of his servant or the eyes of his maid, that it perisheth, he shall let him go free for his eye's sake. And if he smite out of his manservant's tooth or his maidservant's tooth, he shall let him go free for his tooth's sake. And so it's giving you these are actual punishments, physical punishments. If you did this, here's the physical punishment you endured, or here's what you had to do. Now, it raises all kinds of questions about the legal system at that time and how do we understand that legal system? These are the civil laws for Israel. Civil laws for Israel. And what Jesus is saying is that civil law for Israel, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, guess what? That gave the ability to go after someone and have someone punished. But guess what? In my kingdom, I'm going to give you a different ethic. Turn the other cheek. Do not retaliate. This seems to be giving up your rights, not about asserting equality, not about asserting a right. This seems about giving up your right, that it's not about you, which seems to be consistent with the entire New Testament, where you are to deny self and take up a cross. So where do we get the, so they borrow from the culture and says that to be slapped that way was an insult. And so that's what Jesus is referring to. But Jesus is making the contrast Jesus is making is not about what the culture is doing. He's making a contrast with the Old Testament law, and it's repeated a number of cases. I think it's in Exodus 21:24, Leviticus 24:20, and Deuteronomy 19:21. I believe those are the three parallel passages. Exodus 21:24, Leviticus 24:20, Deuteronomy 19:21. So we have to understand what Jesus is saying as a contrast to that. Here's the way it worked, but here's how it should work for the people in my kingdom. Here's the true morality that you must live according to and that you're going to fall short of. Yeah, I still believe that that's the key element of the sermon, is that it's giving us a righteousness we cannot keep. Let me do something. I'm gonna do one other thing here. I'm gonna go back up. I'm gonna go to Matthew 5:39, and I'm just gonna look at what turn the other cheek also. All right, here we go. We all quote and admire the words as painting an ideal meekness, but most men feel also that they cannot act on them literally. That to make the attempt, as has been done by some, the world calls dreamers or fanatics, would throw society into confusion and make the meek the victim. The question meets us, therefore, were they meant to be obeyed in the letter? And if not, what do they command? And the answer is found in remembering that our Lord himself, when smitten by the servant of the high priest, protested, though he did not resist. And that St. Paul, under like outrage, was vehement in his rebuke. And number two, and the fact that the whole context shows that the Sermon on the Mount is not a code of laws, but an assertion of principles. And the principles in this matter is clearly and simply this, that the disciples of Christ, when he has suffered wrong, is to eliminate altogether from his motives the natural desire to retaliate or accuse. And as far as himself is concerned, he must be prepared in language, which, because it is above our common human strain, has stamped itself on the hearts and memories of men to turn the left cheek when the right has been smitten. But the man who has been wrong has other duties which he cannot rightly ignore. The law of the eternal has to be asserted, society to be protected, the offender to be reclaimed, and there must well justify, though personal animosity does not, protest, persecution, and punishment. So what he is saying is we are not to retaliate, but that doesn't mean that we don't go to the legal system not to retaliate. But we don't. Okay, but how literally do we take that? How literally do we take this? I think we spend so much time dismissing what Jesus is saying here. I don't think we have to dismiss it. I think what we say is Jesus is giving an ethic here that is beyond my ability to ever fully obey. I'm never going to fully obey this correctly. I am not going to fully obey this correctly. Let me give you an example of something that I did wrong. I did this completely wrong. All right? And I did not handle myself in a godly way. So I'm just going to tell the story because I'm just being honest here, right? So, because I've always said that I try my best to say what I think this text means in Matthew 5, but I've also clearly stated that I don't always follow it, and I don't know if I would follow it. I think Jesus is calling for a very radical righteousness here of not retaliating. When someone comes after you, not retaliating, not resisting that evil. And I know that sounds insane. And I think it is insane because it's a righteousness that we're never going to truly follow. It doesn't excuse us when we don't follow it, but I'm going to give a story here, and everyone's going to say that I was right. But I believe scripturally I was wrong. Let me tell you the story. All right. So I back when there was a store here called Hastings Books and Records where I used to buy a lot of my music. And I was in there that day buying music. I don't know what I was purchasing. And as I got ready to walk to the car, I was actually driving my daughter's car. My wife had my car. I got ready to come around. The car was like, I was seeing the side of the car. And when I was going to have to walk around the front of the car to get to the driver's door. And as I turn around, there's these people kneeling down by the car. They've got a tube in the gas tank, and they're siphoning the gas. They're stealing the gas from the car. And I stand there, and I'm like, hey. Well, the person stands up, shoves me, tells me to go away. Now, two things are going on here. Number one, I hate when people steal. I hate when people steal illegally download movies or illegally download music. I hate when people steal because it's taking someone else's property, and that makes me angry because I've had to work to get what I want. Why do other people get to steal what other people have? It makes me angry. So there's my flesh. So already I'm angry. How dare they steal the gasoline from my daughter's gas tank? How dare they do this, right? They shove me. Now they shoved me. Now everything's rising up in me. And I'm like, ooh, now I'm getting mad. Now I'm getting really angry. So pushes me again and tells me to go away. And I'm like, I'm not going anywhere, right? Now, this is what I should have done. Hey, you need the gasoline? Just take it. Take as much as you need. Just leave me enough that I can get over to the gas station. All right, let's do this. You walk over there to the gas station because there's a gas station right in the corner where the store was. You walk over there. I'll drive right there to you, and I'll pay the money to fill up how much gas you need. Right? In other words, I'm willing to do. I should have said something along those lines. I'm willing to help you out, but I did not because my flesh is involved. Shove me again. Now shoved me harder, and the third shove, I came back with a strike to the throat of the individual. We'd just been working on this in martial arts class. This immediate just strike almost right underneath the Adam's apple, right where that little indention is. And if you've ever been punched there, boom. And I don't know if I did a finger strike or a knuckle strike, but boom, it went, and he dropped down. And I immediately, I already had the keys in my hand. I immediately ran over to the door, hopped in, and started and took off. The hose was still hanging out of the car. I just took off and left them there. Now, I could say that with some kind of bragging that, look, man, that martial arts technique, I did. And I've been in martial arts a good portion of my life. So I was like, I did that right. That took down that individual quickly. That took like seconds. But was that scriptural? I struck a human being because they were stealing gasoline and they were pushing me. That's not biblical. There's no way to justify that scripturally. Now, what if I would have done if they would have walked around the corner? I'll give you another example. That same parking lot. This is crazy. The same parking lot, not quite in the exact same section, but that Hastings Books and Records used to be, way back in the day, an Albertsons grocery store. I don't know if you remember Albertsons grocery store. And I worked there as a bagger. Who would, when people would check out, I'd put the groceries in the bag and then take the cart and take it out to the car. I had taken someone's groceries out and I was pushing the cart back, and two individuals were beating someone, senseless. They were beating the person down. I mean, just absolutely. I don't know if I thought they were going to kill the guy. Now, I could have just gone in and called the cops, but I said, hey, stop. And they both came after me and said, you need to keep going. I'm like, I'm not going anywhere again. Now, at this point, I don't even know if I was a Christian. I think if I was a Christian, I was a brand new Christian. So this one, the one that happened at in the same parking lot with my daughter's car, I'd been a Christian for a very long time. I was a pastor. So clearly there was no, there was no justification for that one. But for this one, I was a teenager. So, and I'd been in martial arts for, I think, a year at this point. So the person comes at me and one comes running at me, and I did a reverse side kick on that person and took that one down, probably broke some ribs. He went down hard. And the other one, I don't remember. I don't know if I did a hip toss. I don't remember what I did, but I disposed of them both relatively quickly, and not in a brave way, like I was going to stand there and wait for them to get back up. I did it, and I took off running into the store screaming at the manager to call the cops. And I don't think when the cops finally got there, I don't think the guy had been beat up. Everyone, I think, was gone. I don't think they caught anyone. And we didn't get any, and we had no, obviously, security cameras at that time. So we didn't get any answer. Now, is that one right? I was trying to protect someone, but then it came at me. So should I have just stood there and say, hey, beat me up, let him go? Would that have been more the biblical approach? See, these are real life situations where I don't know what I would do. And I've stated it 1,000 times. I don't own a gun. Don't carry a gun. Don't have a concealed carry permit, an open carry permit. Don't carry a gun. Don't have a gun in my house. And I've stated this. If I had a gun in my house and someone broke into my house to go after my family, that I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I'm godly. I would probably take that gun and unload it on the individual trying to harm my family. I would probably unload it. I may even and I know when I say this, people think I'm exaggerating it. I'm just telling you my flesh. I would unload that gun, reload it, and probably continue firing until there was no bullet left in the house to ensure that person would never harm anyone in my family ever again. Now, the only thing is, if I do that, and in light of what Jesus says here, am I doing what is right? I don't know if I can justify that biblically. I've always said if I did that, I don't know if I could say that was right. I don't know if I could say I was justified before God. Because I'm killing a human being. I'm sending that human being into eternity, to heaven or to hell. Where me, as a Christian, my wife, as a Christian, the worst that could happen to us would be killed and go to heaven. So we're literally fighting not to go to heaven. We're literally fighting not to suffer physical harm by sending someone else into eternity. How do I process all of that? How do I process that in light of what Jesus says here? It's not an eye for an eye. It's not a tooth for you. Don't retaliate. That's physical retaliation that Jesus is referring to. He is saying don't physically retaliate. In fact, you go so far above that boom, you smack. Here, hit me the other one. Boom. I resist not evil. Look at literally the words. That you resist not evil, but whosoever shall smite thee on thy right cheek, turn to him the other also. Now, is that literal? Or is it just, no, when someone insults you? Just don't fight back in certain situations. See, we don't want to make it that literal. We want to reduce it to the least intrusive command possible so that we can all obey it. But is that the purpose of the Sermon on the Mount, to give us commands that are easily to obey? I say not. Look, thou shalt not commit adultery. That's a physical act. Again, I hope that I can abstain from the physical act, right? I think we all think that that's at least within our grasp. But then he goes so far to say, but no. I say to you, you go the extra mile. You don't even look at a woman with lust. Whoa, he just expanded it. So clearly, if he's taking the Old Testament, an eye for an eye and tooth for a tooth, and then says, hey, but you turn the other cheek. It's not about exerting your rights and telling everyone that I don't see how that works. I will say this, that based off what the Sermon on the Mount appears to be doing, is offering a righteousness that is so beyond anything anyone had ever heard, that the only consistent way to interpret this passage then would be to say, hey, this is a righteousness that you're going to be convicted by, you're going to be condemned by, and you're not going to like it, and you're not going to want to do it. I think if we reduce it to that, then we change the literal meaning of the sermon. Remember, Matthew 5:38 and 39 has to be understood in the context of the sermon. It cannot be reduced. It cannot be taken from the sermon itself. So that article that we just read and all the articles ignore verse 38. They really ignore verse 38. In fact, verse 39, what Jesus is telling you to do, hey, they're going to backhand you because everyone's right-handed. So they're going to backhand you. You turn, and that is an insult. That's how they treat a slave. That's how they treat someone who's not being treated as an equal. You turn to the left and you say, come on, hit me now. Hit me now. Treat me as an equal. Show me that your system is oppressive and it's built on inequality. Treat me as an equal. Call me your equal. I will subvert your entire system. This is about me standing up for my equality and my rights. Just not in a violent way. That doesn't seem to fit at all the sermon. Now you can tell me what you think, and you can ask all the questions. I'm going to leave this labeled part 1. Part 2 will only occur if you have further thoughts, questions, ideas, other interpretations you would like me to consider. Here's what I want to do, though. Part 2 is going to be up to you. Here's what I'm going to say to end part 1. If you've spent more time explaining away what Jesus has said in the Sermon on the Mount than actually trying to figure out what you need to do about it, then you have not handled the Word of God correctly. This cannot be a passage where you spend all of your time saying it can't mean this, and it can't mean this, and it can't mean this, and it can't mean this. How does this apply to churches where, hey, okay, we've got 5 armed men in this church, and if someone comes into this church to harm someone, we're killing them. We're taking them down. And people say, well, we're not going to try to kill. If you're shooting at someone, you're going with the idea that you don't point a gun at someone unless you're willing to kill them, okay? It's just not the way it works. And there was a church in Dallas, Texas, where this happened. I was after one of the church shootings. So this church in Dallas armed all of these people. The sermon, they removed the sermon from the internet because it was so insane. But they basically said, hey, if you're in these pews and a shooting happens, you go down because we got people behind you and here. They tell them where they are in the church. They will eliminate the threat. And then they talked this story where this guy came into the church and was causing all of this trouble, and they were trying to escort the person out. And the person started reaching in, and they thought he was going to grab a gun. So one of the deacons pulled the gun and almost shot the person. And the person was simply pulling out, I think, their phone. They literally almost killed a human being inside a church because they thought the person was a threat. Now, if they would have shot him, they would have said it was justified, because they felt in danger for their life. Is that the New Testament model? I don't know. I have a hard time with all of this. And I know I get labeled the liberal pacifist. I know that. Look, there's nothing liberal and pacifistic in my body. I want to fight. In my body, I will throw down and fight you. But I cannot justify that feeling scripturally. That's the only thing I'm saying. I'm not saying that I'm more spiritual than you, that I've figured out a life of peace and being passive. No, I'm the one who would fight. I was the one in high school, lived a life of being bullied. I mean, I didn't want to talk about my high school life. It was horrific. But I was also the one who looked to extort revenge any way I could, doing horrible things, destroying people's vehicles, slashing tires, pouring things into their gas tank to go back after them. I mean, getting a guy to chase me behind a convenience store who was one of the big bullies who kept beating me up, to have a friend back there with a baseball bat, and then we beat the living garbage out of him. Now, most of those things I did before I became a Christian, but that's in my flesh. I was always smaller, but I was not the one. I was not willing to back down. My thought is, you may beat me up today, but I'm going to get you tomorrow. One way or the other, I'm going to get you to tomorrow. Tomorrow, I will find a way. And it may not be tomorrow, literally. It may be a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. It may be 6 months, but the time is coming. Revenge is coming. I'm going to avenge. I am not going to have you run me over. But I became a Christian, and I'm like, wait, Jesus seems, I'm supposed to love my enemy. Well, how does it look like if I'm loving my enemy by putting 3 bullets in them? I don't really understand how that corresponds. Well, when he says love your enemy, he doesn't mean don't defend yourself. Okay, all right. So what does it actually mean? What does that, bless those who persecute you? What does that look like? Resist not evil. What does that look like? Turn the other cheek. What does that look like? And I came to the conclusion that Jesus is giving an ethic here in the Sermon on the Mount that has to go beyond anything that I would ever want to do in my flesh. It has to go beyond anything that I can even hope to accomplish. And therefore, the only hope of the Sermon on the Mount, what the Sermon on the Mount is ultimately intended to do, is drive me to the foot of the cross, because I have to find a righteousness that comes from something other than myself, because I cannot keep these demands. Now, that doesn't mean I don't strive to try to follow them, and I got to figure out what they mean, but I can't spend my time trying to explain them away. Look, if you want to explain away, turn the other cheek. If you want to explain that away, you explain it away. But then don't get mad when someone wants to explain away looking at a woman with lust. Don't get mad when someone wants to explain away fornication or adultery or homosexuality. Don't get mad. If you want to explain that away, don't get mad when everyone else wants to explain the things that they don't like. You don't like turn the other cheek. You don't want that be passive. You want to carry your gun and use your gun whenever you think it's necessary. So you explain that away. You explain love your enemy, turn the other cheek. Well, don't get mad when someone else tries to explain the way homosexuality being condemned. Well, it doesn't really mean that. Or fornication, or adultery, or lust, or pornography. Don't get mad. If you can explain away what you don't like, then you got to give freedom to everyone else to explain away what they don't like. And when it's all said and done, we've reduced the law of God and the commandments of God to something that is manageable and that we can all accomplish. And therefore, we don't even need Jesus. Or his righteous demands are so beyond our even comprehension that all we can do I've said it before, the only proper response to the Sermon on the Mount is, woe is me, I am undone. I am an unclean man, unclean lips, unclean thoughts, unclean actions. I deserve hell. And I think that if we lessen it to something, we've done a disservice to it. You can let me know what you think. There you have it. Sermon on the Mount. You can let me know what you think. 52 minutes. That was supposed to be like 20 minutes, but it never is. There you have it. All right. Whew, that's gonna create some controversy. newsif@yahoo.com. The pro-gun people always get ticked off at me at this. Oh, and they think that I'm somehow their enemy. I'm not your enemy. I'm just simply saying, look, pro-gun, that's a political, constitutional argument. You go have that. I'm just trying to say, how do I understand pro-gun, violence and self-defense? How do I understand all of that from the perspective of the New Testament? That's all I try to say. And that we have to struggle with that, even if it comes to conclusions we don't like. That doesn't mean I'm saying, I completely agree with this and it's what I want. No, I'm saying that in my flesh, I don't want any of it. But I can't just make it go away, because if we're going to start making things go away, there's some other commands I would like to make go away. I wouldn't even start with turn the other cheek. There's other ones that I would rather get rid of. There's other ones I would rather get rid of. And so if that's the way we're going to handle the scripture, then let's just start going through cutting out anything we don't like. And that can't be the way. It's got to mean something. What does Jesus mean? Turn the other cheek, resist not evil, and love your enemy. And then he demonstrates that exact same thing, that he doesn't retaliate when he tells Peter to put away the sword, and he literally heals the man who's trying to arrest him. And then he says, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. He doesn't resist. He doesn't fight back. Why not? And then Jesus is considered the example that we're to follow by Peter. After Peter would know because he was rebuked for trying to fight back. How do we understand all of that? It's got to mean something. It's got to mean something. It's got to have some kind of like punch to it, right? It can't be like, oh, that's nothing. That's nothing. That's like the teacher coming in saying, hey guys, this test I'm going to give you, you've got to be perfect or you're going to fail. This test, I'm going to give you a test that shows you the standard of this institution of higher learning, right? And let's say it's a college class, and they come in and the questions are like, write down the ABCs, write down the numbers 1 through 10. Give me the primary colors. I mean, whatever the case. I mean, like just ridiculous, basic, elementary questions. And you're like, oh, okay, wow, woo, that's such a high standard. You would almost laugh at it and mock it. We turned some of the things in the Sermon on the Mount to basically a meaningless standard that can be mocked because we take away any punch from it. And I think that goes against the whole Sermon on the Mount. All right, I'll stop. Everyone have a great day. I've got to go home. We'll be back tomorrow. As always, email me anytime you want, newsif@yahoo.com. God bless.